everybody. We're back again for another week of putting some fun back into our dysfunctional lives. I'm Amy, and I'm here with my friend Buck.
Yes, and today we thought we'd talk about youth and mental health. Are they getting the help they need? Are they overly medicated? This week in Canada, they've been showing commercials that 1 in 2 young people experience some sort of mental health issue. And this week is kind of the focus on youth mental health. So Amy has been a therapist for 35 years. 35 years.
Yeah, since I've been a therapist continually since 1989. Never not had a job as a therapist since 1989.
And Amy has specialized in dealing with high risk youth, low income. She is also an expert on play therapy.
Right.
So, Amy, if you want to expand on that, is it
Sure.
nature or nurture?
It's a combination of both. When I was a kid, I remember my uncle was a psychiatrist, and I was spending some time with them, and I said something about like thinking it was all nurture, and he and my aunt kind of chuckled a little bit. Yeah, yeah, and I was like, but I'm right. And then as I became an older person and started to see what was going on out there, I realized that it really is a combination of both. That I think very good nurture can ameliorate bad nature, but bad nature is going to have an impact. I mean, we're born with, we're in our bodies, our brains are developed certain ways, and our genetics play a huge role. And we can see that through things like twin studies of twins being separated at birth and those kind of things. You can see all kinds of ways that the nature persists despite whatever nurture is there. But I think if you have like I've seen in foster care situations, children with like fetal alcohol syndrome or fetal alcohol effects, which is kind of a baby brother to that, with very good nurture, a lot of the more heinous aspects of that can really be ameliorated, really be affected positively. So I can't say that it's one or the other, but if you have if it's part of your nature that you have a genetic predisposition to something, it can either be like triggered by nurture or by life, or it can stay dormant. So I think for a lot of kids who might have had a predisposition to like anxiety effects or anxiety disorder, things like the pandemic really impacted on that. And I think the pandemic brought out a lot of bad nurture, about a lot of bad nature for a lot of kids. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I saw something a movie the other day where you know the mother had been schizophrenic. So the son, who was very intelligent, was so afraid all the time that he was going to become schizophrenic because it is passed down, evidently.
Absolutely. That's completely,
And
it's all genetic.
my mother was bipolar. My mother had Alzheimer's, and wonder if I'm going to get that because
I get it.
I
Well, you
got her.
would know if you're
I got her
bipolar.
money.
Yeah. The thing about bipolar, if you have one parent who's bipolar, your chances of becoming bipolar are about 50%. If you have two bipolar parents, it becomes 75%. So it's hugely genetic. Bipolar is very genetic. And that's one of the things that can be ameliorated with good nurture. That it's less likely to become an issue if you have some decent life experiences and good nurture. And I know that wasn't the case, but just because it's there and there's genetics there doesn't mean that you're going to get it. My guess is that your siblings, probably like some of your siblings might have had it, or do
Yeah,
you have, you know
yeah,
but you don't know. You would know by now if you were going to be bipolar.
yeah.
You're depressed and anxious, but you're not bipolar, and you don't have, as far as I can tell, you don't have any Alzheimer's yet either. So you've dodged those bullets.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, what about because I mean I'm on a new medication and it's very strong. Sometimes I feel like I have Alzheimer's because even just last night I was trying to put something together for dinner and I just stood in the middle of the floor, not
Yeah.
going left, not going
Yeah.
right. No, it was just like, is this Alzheimer's? But I think
No.
it's medication, and I'd rather
Yeah.
just stay on the medication and hope this goes away. It's less than it used to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a could very well be a side effect, and you're absolutely right that as you become more, you know, used to the med and it becomes more, you're more stable on it,
Right.
that some of those side effects will disappear, or at least not be as bad. But I know a lot of those meds make you have. I have a client on Topamax for like serious migraines, and she calls it Topamax mush brain because
Yeah.
she just can't, she can't retrieve things as fast and things like that. So here's the difference between like a attention problem and a mush brain problem versus Alzheimer's is when you're not paying attention, you have a senior moment, you can't find your keys. With Alzheimer's, you find your keys, but you don't know what they're for, you know,
Right.
or you put your shoes in the refrigerator,
Right.
those kind of things. So, or you think that you're going to fall into a hole in the ground and it turns out to be an area rug, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but most of the time when we think it's a senior moment, we talked about this before, I think it's not really a senior moment. It's not really forgetfulness. It's just attention. You're not paying attention, you know?
Right. And
Or
when
you
they
have
get,
other things on your mind at the same time. When you walk into a room and you forget why you went there, it's because you were thinking about something else on the way.
when you medicate kids, I mean, they used to just give them the medication, and it was really kind of adult strength.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So now there's more
It's more
kind
understanding of,
of,
yeah,
yeah, like,
dosages.
looking at it and stuff like that. But I just get the impression that especially in the early 2000s, like and late 90s, they were just giving out medication to kids like candy. Like every child had ADHD. Like
Well,
every child now is allergic to peanuts.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, where did all this come from? Like now we swung the other way where we're overly protective and we see look for any warning sign or stuff like that. And
Yeah,
autism and all of this stuff. And
right.
do these drugs cause autism? No, they don't. And
100% no on that. No,
so,
no. Autism is a neurological thing that is genetically, and we don't know why, and we don't know what is the trigger, but it's definitely not vaccinations. There was one really bad study that was done that showed that kids get autism from vaccinations, and it was totally discredited. And in the meantime, we have like hundreds of tests of empirical evidence that shows that that's absolutely not the case. That a lot of times autistic symptoms kind of show up around the same time as the medications, but that doesn't, the correlation does not equal causation, and it's 100% disproven that there's any connection
right,
between autism and vaccinations, and it just drives me nuts that people still believe it based on one badly done study and anecdotal evidence of my kid got the vaccination and then he became autistic. No, your kid got the vaccination and his symptoms of autism started to show up at the same time. That's all, you know. And autism is a spectrum, like there's I have family members who have been diagnosed who are absolutely wonderful, little quirky, some social skills issues, but basically really good people. And then you have people who are on the far end of being like overly, like me, I'm like overly empathic sometimes,
yeah,
you know. So
yeah,
it's a spectrum. And so the other part of your statement before was, are we over medicating? Here's the thing about ADHD meds. There's a lot of parents want to put their kids on ADHD meds because they just don't want kids who are kids, you know? And so we have to do really good differential diagnoses about what's going on in a kid's life and what stage of what level of development they're in and all of those kind of things before we give them medication. If a kid actually does have ADHD, those meds are some of the most efficacious psychotropic meds out there. They work. They get in, they work, they get out. They don't like, you don't need to like titrate them into your system. They're just, you give them the dose, it's in there. It's like an aspirin. You don't take an aspirin and then have to go have a liver check because it can build up or something like
Right.
that. They don't. And there are some ADHD meds that do. Those are the ones that are a little more off brand, that are not, the ones that are, there's a couple that are given to kids that are really meant for other purposes, but they also can work on ADHD. But things like Strattera, or not Strattera, that's one of the ones that's a little bit trickier. But things like Ritalin and Adderall and Vyvanse, those kind of things they're clean meds and they're good. And if you're here's the thing is I think we call it a paradoxical effect because they're uppers but they calm kids down. Well, what they really do is they help you be able to concentrate.
Right.
So, and they make that all of those brain foggy things less, so that the kids can concentrate and pay attention and sit still. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I took Ritalin in my 30s,
Yeah.
and the doctor said it makes you go faster, so you slow down. He said, if that makes sense. And I said, it does. He said, because you're going so fast that you can't
Right.
concentrate on one thing.
Right. Right. It's like a
So
turbocharged brain.
if I make you go as fast as your brain, you actually catch up and you slow down.
Yeah.
And you're able to, sort of see each moment as it
Yeah.
goes. But
Yeah.
right now you're going so fast and the world is not keeping up with you.
Right. Right.
So he said, I make your body, your physiology keep up with you.
Keep up with your brain. Yeah.
Right. So then you feel like you're slowing down, that you can actually see things. And that was a big part of my, and I'm sure I still have it. I just don't really, I have so many other things to
It
focus
doesn't
on.
matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing about that too, is like for some people who really need to be able to concentrate on minute details or whatever, it might be something that they want to look into. But for other people, I knew the psychiatrist he was admittedly ADHD. Like if you wanted to talk to him, you had to walk down the hall and talk to him because he was going to go wherever he was going to go, no matter what. And he said he made a decision not to be on those meds because he liked being able to like do a lot of stuff, you know, and it was fine for him. It worked for him. And in school, he was intelligent enough and had enough support that like so if he couldn't sit still in class, instead of like sending him to the principal's office to go try to sit still there, they would send him to the gym to shoot basketballs until he was worn out
Right.
enough to come sit still, you know. So
Yeah.
if we can give kids that kind of support too, then sometimes they don't need those meds. And then there are some kids who really do need them, you know? Like, because I had one kid who the mom was just not going to do it. She was not going to do it. And then finally I said, why don't you just try it? Because it's not like, I mean, if you don't want him to be on it, you give it to him, it'll work. If it doesn't work, then he doesn't need it. Don't give it to him, you know? So
Yeah.
just try it. And she came in the next time and I said, how did the meds work? She goes, he's a different kid. Because he was so much better. I
Yeah.
was like, it's okay. They're not that expensive because they're pretty prevalent and they can be, the other thing about it is you can usually get it through your general practitioner. If you have like if there's a diagnosis from somebody who can't give meds like me,
Right.
but I know the diagnoses and they can take it to their doctor and say, this is the diagnosis and here's
Yeah.
the criterion and here's what he meets. Then they can usually get their GP to give them the meds instead of having to fight a psychiatrist. For other meds like the ADHD I'm sorry, for like depression meds and even the anxiety meds, I would say you're better off to have a psychiatrist who knows something about those meds and whether they're going to work well or not.
So, Amy, you started off working in like a community-based center where
Yes.
you had low-income, at-risk kids as your clients.
Right. Well, I started off in community mental health, and it was in a small town in Illinois called Danville, and which is a long story about how I got there. But that was primarily that when you're in community mental health, by definition, it's lower income people because that's what you're there to serve for free or very low cost services. So, and then when I moved to Chicago, I worked in foster care, and that was a whole lot more diverse and a lot more ethnic. I was in this. I worked basically on the south side of Chicago, so it was generally um, pretty ethnic, and and I had to. That was a big change for me. I had to really figure that out, and I had to kind of prove myself that I wasn't judgmental or unable to understand culture, things like that. Uh, so that was a great experience for me. I am still say that was one of the best job experiences I ever had because I had to learn not just more about my profession, not just more about how to treat kids and families, but how to be in a culture that wasn't my own, that was different than mine. So so it was a really good experience. And then it was funny because then I took another job as a supervisor at a different community health place in the suburbs, and had to I had to go buy white dolls because I didn't have any white dolls for kids. So that was kind of funny because I was doing a presentation and this lady asked me like, "So do you use ethnic dolls?" And dollhouse families and things like that. And I said, a lot of times I'll just use animals because those are, neutral. But I said when I did have dolls, I ended up having to like go buy dolls that were white when I went to a different place. So because I
Yeah.
had Latino dolls and African American dolls, and I didn't, baby dolls and dollhouse families and those kind of things. Anyway, so yeah, so I had to, it's a really it becomes an important issue to be sensitive to cultural norms as well. The general age for play therapy is maybe 4 to about 11 is sort of the general age. You
Mhm.
can use different types of play therapy with older kids too, and I do introduce it sometimes depending on who the kid is and what they're there for and those kind of things. But it also depends on your orientation because play therapy encompasses, just like regular therapy encompasses, lots of different ways to do it: cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, Jungian, and uh, uh, there's different kinds. Like I could kind of find them if I can retrieve them, but and play therapy is the same. So I am trained in a couple of different types of play therapy. So my bias is that I really like child-centered play therapy, which is developed which is largely like, well, developed by several people, but kind of brought to a more of a routinized kind of way of doing it by a guy named Gary Landreth. And I was trained by him a couple of times, different trainings went to his, and then different people that I've done things with. So it really depends on what I think the kid is going to need, depends on my interview with the parent and how we decide, treatment planning, those kind of things. But generally, I meet together with the parent and the kid for the first session. Sometimes I meet with the parents by themselves to just get an idea because I don't necessarily want to talk about things like how do you discipline or what kind of things are happening in the home that might not have anything to do with the kid. So I do that, and then we meet all together and we set the goals for the treatment and talk about the fact that we're going to be playing, but that we're actually doing our work at the same time.
Right.
Discuss the goals, and then um, basically I have a room full of toys, and I say this is a place where you can play with these toys in a lot of the ways that you want to, and then I let them decide, and then within that, then I make comments and you make statements and you track. Tracking means that you kind of say you use a lot of you statements, and I
Right.
don't mean you statements like, like how when you're fighting you say you're a jerk or whatever. Like that's not a you statement. That's an I statement. I think you're a jerk. So
Mm.
you statement is other focused and helps the play to continue. So I'll say, "Oh, you've decided to play with that today." And those kind of things,
Right.
and just keep tracking and seeing what. So I'm looking for what does the kid pick to do? How much do they involve me? Are they afraid of certain things or act like they don't want to look at certain things? Are there certain things that they're seriously drawn to every single time? So there's all kinds of. It's a lot harder than you might think. It's like learning a different language with every kid.
No, I
So
mean, I when I went to a psychiatrist in fourth, fifth grade, where it was,
yeah,
um, he, I remember, I do remember, I remember him very well because he was the first person that really
listen to you.
said that I was okay,
Yeah.
and that we were going to get through this. But I remember the second therapy. I remember that because it's the only time my father ever came, and my father just watched. That's the only time he ever came, and I he had a dollhouse, and he had all like a giant dollhouse and like all these trucks and stuff like that, and so I just kind of played with the trucks, and he was like, what do you see when you look at the house, stuff like that. And I didn't want to do it. And then there was a point where he just said, well, he goes, I think maybe you're too old for this, because all I did was play with the trucks because I love trucks. I love to like build roads and do
Yeah.
the excavation and stuff like that. I mean, so not your typical gay
See, but
kid,
to me, that
but
is the
he,
therapy.
yeah, I know, but he was
Yeah.
just like, well, I don't. Maybe you're too old for this. He did a lot of you things like you're talking about.
Right. Right.
You're mad.
Hmm.
You have every right. You have, it's okay that you wish your parents were dead
Yeah.
because every child does that sometimes, wishes their parents were dead. You don't
Absolutely.
have the power to make it happen. Have you seen these commercials lately? I don't know if they're Canadian commercials, but the woman and her daughter, or the man of color with his daughter, and he's reading her story or something like that, and she says, "Am I going to be happy? What's going to happen?" And he goes, "Oh, this is the beginning of your life, blah blah blah." And he talks, and then he goes, "And then at 15, you're going to feel bad about your body
Yeah.
because you're bombarded with stuff from the internet, and then you're going to stop eating." And then you probably are going to cut yourself, and things like that. And I think with the internet today, I mean, when they said that they were going to ban TikTok, because I don't use TikTok, I thought, yay.
Yeah.
Because these young girls and boys just look at these images of people who are having
Right.
this fantastic life, and they're thin and they're, tan, and they're always having a great time, and, watching people laughing at other people's expense, which is not a good moral or, mentally
Yeah.
appropriate thing for them to be seeing at a younger age, because this is how they're going to develop into
You're going to
people
internalize it.
who either care about other people or laugh at other people. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on these, what is social media doing to the
Yeah.
youth?
Well, without having tons of knowledge on, the data and things like that, I think that the data shows that kids are more susceptible to emotional dysregulation when they look at things like that. That I don't know that things like suicide rates and things like that are impacted by those kind of things, but I imagine that they don't help.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's when we were
Especially
kids,
when
like
you
you
get
compare
bullied,
yourself. Pardon?
when you get bullied on the internet,
Yeah, yeah, that's a terrible thing.
saying you should just die. Why don't you go
Yeah,
and, I mean, now they can say that without ever confronting you
right,
because they're
right.
hidden behind the keyboard.
They don't see you. Yeah,
Sometimes you don't even know who it is. I've had
right.
people say things who
Just
I don't
horrible
know
thing.
why they're commenting on my Facebook post. So I've had to
Right,
block them, and I don't even know them, and they
right.
comment. So I'm very clear to just show it to my friends or whatever like that. But people are just waiting to bully you.
Yes,
And
yeah.
I mean, has that bullying culture always been?
It's
But
always
now,
been. I mean, that's the bullies are have always been, and then but it's just like ramped up exponentially because, I saw a show like 60 Minutes or something did a show. There's a lady who had a blog or a news lady or something, and people were saying heinous things to her on just stuff about like things like, oh, you should die or whatever it was. And so they contacted some of these people who had made these comments and brought them to the studio, and they had her sitting there, and she said whatever it was that she had said, and then she looked at them like, now you say what you said on your post. What did you say? And they didn't want to say it. When
right?
they knew that people were going to hear them, or they knew that, and they had to look the person in the eye, and then the person knew that was them, they wouldn't say those things.
Well, plus they're on
So
national television, so
yeah, yeah, that's true too. That it was sort of like, yeah, this is But then you watch things like Jerry Springer, the Jenny Jones Show, or those horrible daytime programs where people are just horrible to each other in real life. And I think sometimes it's kind of like the people who go on American Idol and are terrible and don't care that they're being made fun of. They just want their 15 minutes of fame,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I think with some people are just like gonna be haters and are gonna say what they want, and you know, having thick skin helps a whole lot. But you know, even if you don't know the person, this is my story about something like that. Was one time this is when I'd been diagnosed for probably 5 or 6 years, and I didn't need to have a cane at that time or any mobility devices, but I would get worn out very quickly and need to sit, you know, or whatever it was. So I went to the library with my family, my son and my husband. We went to the library. And when I came out, there was a nasty note on my windshield. Somebody had written me a nasty note on a deposit slip, which was, and they tried to cross off the numbers, but I was like, I could see it. I could find this out if I wanted
Not
to.
the brightest people.
Yeah, not right. But it said something like, "You don't look handicapped to me. Uh, Good job ripping off the system," or something like that. And I was like, that person knows nothing about me.
Right.
They don't know what it's like to live in this body that gets worn out and doesn't work and does weird things and trips and falls and, you know, all the things that happen when you have MS. I always thought if somebody said something about me being in the handicap parking, I wouldn't care. But I did, what much more than I thought. And I'm not influenced by other people that much. I have a pretty thick skin myself.
I don't know if you did this. There was a camp, a day camp for, I guess it was 10 days for kids who were emotionally challenged, like had,
Yeah.
we used to say emotionally disturbed, but they're not emotionally disturbed. That's the
No, they
wrong.
just have
Yeah.
mental health issues or whatever.
So I really liked doing it. It was out at Binder
Yeah.
Lake. Did you ever do it?
Cool. No, uh-uh.
Oh, I don't even know how I found out about it. I think one teacher said
No.
you should do this. It would look good on your resume, blah, blah, blah. So, and
That's
you
cool.
got paid. So I did
That's
it.
neat.
And, we had like hikes and we had like, I did a little play with them and stuff.
That's
And
cool.
there was one kid though that really got to me, and I realized kind of this is probably not what I should be doing because I got really attached to him because I could see
You.
he had bruises on him.
Oh, yeah.
And I could see that he was very, very quiet. So I related a lot to him with the bruise thing. So um, I got him to kind of come out of his shell and he was excited. And I gave him my home phone number, which he called me because I was scared that they were doing something to him, either his mom or his dad. So he called me once. This is while we were at camp and stuff. And he said, I can't come in anymore. I have to go. And I was like, what? Wait, what? So, and back then that was, you didn't have, you couldn't see the call. So
Right, right. No caller ID.
I couldn't, the caller ID. I couldn't
Yeah.
call him back. So I was in DeBrooks, remember the grocery store?
Yeah.
And I was there and he got out of the car with his mom. And I can't remember his name. And I said, "Oh, hi. What happened to you?" And she said to me, "Get away from him." And I said, "Well, he was a really good student. I mean, he was a really good camper. And she said, "No, we don't do that anymore. His father won't let him. So just stay away." And I was like, what is going on? And I realized that she must have found out that he was calling me.
Yeah.
And so, I would be somebody who could, like, I don't know, report them or something like that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he just disappeared, which made me really sad because he really did start to come out of his shell and I saw him smile. I saw him laugh.
So when you're dealing with kids, you have to like have lots of ammunition to be able to make sure you know what's going on with them. You have to have lots of empathy and awareness and the ability to kind of see them as their individual selves instead of part of the pack.
Right.
And we need to be kinder to our kids in this country and more aware of how things like social media impact
Right.
on them in general.